Funny.
Hey, yes, it's gone a bit slow. Hello, I hope everybody can hear me. Welcome to the Effect Podcast and to Book Club. And we've got with us over there, Andy, and down there, we've got Thomas. Tell you what, I'm going to swap places with you, Thomas. So my two guests
Okay.
can have top billing, as it were. And we are looking at an alpha that we've got, and the alpha is the D Sanction, and it's well. Can we do a little brief story of why we were into this game? I think I was into it first when I saw it advertised. But Andy, you've got really excited by this. I mean, I thought
I
you were all about Twilight 2000, but You've dropped that
well,
Twilight
I
2000.
haven't dropped it. I haven't dropped it. I okay. I saw this. The thing about this was that John Dee has always fascinated me. This is a game about John Dee. We should explain that. Dee Sanction.
Mhm.
And John Dee has always fascinated me for a very long time. And I backed the Kickstarter because I like the look of the John Dee sort of setup. But I then started reading about Tudor stuff in general. I then started to get carried away with some Tudor fiction I read, and it all snowballed from there. And suddenly, I'm very keen on it all.
Yeah, it's funny
So
actually. I
the
remember you
incremental thing.
saying a little bit right at the beginning. You said, well, "What's so special about this game?" And then
Hmm.
I said, "Well, it's the reason why I like it is I've got a kind of professional connection with John D. Not a professional connection with John D, but I
Yeah, he's your
I did
employer. You
something
can admit it.
professionally with the John D story." And then you went, "Oh, actually, this is a period that's never covered really in role playing games,"
No, it
and
isn't.
that
No.
seemed to be your initial spark of interest. But
Well, the other problem is that this is a period that if you do 15 to 1700s in role playing in general, it's pirates, right?
hmm.
I mean, that's literally what comes up first. They do pirates, right?
Or, of
And
course, A Savage World of Solomon Kane, which is a great
yeah,
game, but
true, but
leave that to one
that's
side.
puritanical, isn't it? That's a bit
Yeah,
later. But the whole thing is there's a whole literally a whole world of stuff other than pirates in the 1600s,
yeah.
and it's just not covered anywhere really. You get games that are based on that sort of thing, that sort of level of world, if you like, but you don't actually get any games based in that world,
Hmm.
which I find well, it's the path less travelled, as I said on the Discord. It's just something that doesn't seem to be, well, I don't know, done at all. Um, so yeah, I think it's a cool period.
Cool.
Um,
And then your bubbling excitement on our Discord, and if you want to join in on our Discord, then I've got the banner for you. Here we go. So your bubbling excitement on our Discord excited you, Thomas, and although you didn't pledge on the original Kickstarter, you put in a late pledge.
I did. I begged. I fundamentally begged.
So what was it? I mean, I don't know whether you'd missed the conversation we'd had before, or whether you were on the Discord then or whatever. But what was the thing that excited you when Andy was frankly being a bit crazy about it? You know, a bit
Do you know
fanatical.
what? It's not really any different. I love the Tudor period. I think it's one of those great moments in history where a nation almost sets itself up, right? Like, so, you could argue that Elizabeth's reign really defines English history for the next 200 to 300 years
Hmm.
quite readily. And I think Walsingham is one of my favorite characters out of the Tudor period. And I'm actually really excited about it because Walsingham brings in the whole spy frame. So whilst it's a story about Dee and that side, it's also a story about Walsingham and
Yeah.
about that sort of let's get agents and go and do things. And I think that's really cool. So yeah,
mm,
Yeah.
so I thought it was brilliant. Yeah, just brilliant.
That's brilliant. And I should say, I guess, having teased my professional connection about, oh, crikey, it's almost 20 years ago now when I was working at Hampton Court Palace. We did a thing all about Queen Elizabeth at Hampton Court. And I was working for a company that provides live interpretation, costumed interpretation. And not for nothing is the Tudor period the beginning of what we call the early modern period. So, we've got all that science happening, and Dee's partly there. But I researched a character that I was going to portray of the lower orders, because the palace is full of highfalutin people in pearl earrings and onion trousers and things like that. But we definitely wanted lower orders, and I latched on to John Dee's second favourite scryer after, what's his name? Kerry, is it? His main guy?
Edward Kelly.
Edward Kelly.
Edward Kelly.
Yeah. And that was a man called Jonathan Hickman, who appears at the beginning. There's a entry in Dee's diaries that says, Mr. Hickman bought his nephew or son or cousin, this young gypsy lad who can see things in the scrying stone, and he's quite a good scryer. I've taken him on, sort of thing. And then he gets cast aside at some point for Kelly. And then right at the end of his life, he says, Jonathan Hickman came round, summoned up an angel, I can't remember which angel it was, to advise me on my piles. And I thought, that's a brilliant ending to their life. So Jonathan Hickman was the guy that, had been there throughout all of Dee's life, all the exciting bits of Dee's life. But the best thing about it is, as in one of the history bits, it mentions there's another mention of Jonathan Hickman, and I cannot remember the case, but Walsingham had set up a Catholic for, burning, obviously. And this Catholic denied he'd been in any part of conspiracy, and he pleaded with him that the incriminating letter that had been found on his possession had been planted on him by a man called Jonathan Hickman. And so I like to think that he was actually one of these agents of the Dee Sanction, even then, back in real history. So that's my thing. Okay, now we're going to do a little bit different for probably not different. We're going to try a proper book club format for this. And I'm going to ask you each in turn to say one of three things you really like about what we've read in this alpha. And I'll join in with that as well. And then obviously we'll do one thing that we might have changed or we might recommend, as this is only an alpha that does get changed. And finally, one really interesting new and original thing that you think comes out of it. Okay? So, Thomas, let's start with you first. What is the first thing that you really like?
I love the tradecraft piece in the game. I think it's one of those really cool ideas that will play forward really well. And I like the way it integrates, particularly in conflict with major opponents. So, you've got a major opponent, you use your tradecraft in one session to sort of get one of the things you need to do to defeat the opponent, and then you might accumulate more. I should explain tradecraft for those who don't know but might have a background in things like Blades in the Dark or Band of Blades. Is not a dissimilar idea in that you sort of encounter the thing and then you call upon your tradecraft for that scenario to sort of fill in that gap. So it's almost retrospectively fixing or addressing an issue. I think you have to call out a type of tradecraft you're going to use, but then you've got it sort of in your back pocket.
Yeah.
It's a really nice mechanic for that sort of agent play. And it's really well explained and integrated into the rules. So Paul, I think it is, who's written the rules, has done a great job of sort of placing it in the context of the game and in the narrative structure, which I think is fabulous. Anyway, that's my first one.
Yeah, we should actually. I haven't put in the show notes thus far, but I will put in the show notes before this goes out as a recording, all the details and links. And it's Paul Badowski, and it's coming from All Rolled Up, which is the company that he and his wife run, that produced the wonderful things like this, this All Rolled Up dice bag. And I have to say, one of the things that made me kickstart it was I really wanted to have the Favoured from the Queen dice bag. And so I went for that top tier to get that. Well, I don't know if it's top tier, but it's a pretty high tier because I'm favoured of the Queen. Okay. We'll come back. I've got a question to ask you about tradecraft, Thomas, in a moment. But first of all, we'll go straight on to Andy. What's the first of the things you really like?
Favors. I love favors. Favors are tiny magical effects that your agent can command. So they're kind of similar to cantrips in D&D, or very minor magical um, expressions of power, if you like. So the rules actually say they last for a few seconds. They're no bigger than a fist. They don't cause any what they call consequences in the game. And the things like you can cause something to rot, or you can cause something to catch fire, or you can make someone slip over, or whatever. So they run the risk of being slapstick, but at the same time, they are a nice little touch of sort of magical effort without overbalancing the players. You don't have players in this running around shooting fireballs from their fingers or calling up demons or whatever. You have them just gaining this angelic favor, which is just a tiny effect that might be useful. And I really like that. It's really subtle. Um, so yeah, I'm really happy with that as an approach to putting in a little bit of the supernatural without unbalancing things. Because
Yeah,
too many games go down the spell grimoire, whatever arcane power route, and yeah,
fireball.
this is much better. Yeah,
No,
so
it felt to me really sort of in keeping with it. I loved Jonathan Hickman so much that after I left that job, I thought I'll
mm,
write a novel about this, which is a stupid thing to do. And I wrote
mm,
about a page and then
mm,
decided against it. But one of my feelings to this was that it was going to be a sort of magic realist novel, in that
mm,
there'd be a lot of strange coincidences and some strange things happening, and you weren't entirely. People would take credit for doing the magic, but had they really done the magic? It
yeah,
was going to be
exactly.
my angle with that. So I like that as well. I'm just going to do my first thing because it's a quote, and I've just found it on my copy. But then I want to come back and talk tradecraft again with you, Thomas. My first thing is a thing it says, and it says, and this is under, I should say, towards the end of the book, the sort of summary of the Tudor age. It says, without years of education and reading, you can't hope to simulate Tudor England, and you shouldn't try, because the end result, for all the wins in immersion, will likely fail to entertain. Play to the level of authenticity that appeals to and engages everyone. And I just want to
Mm,
say great huzzah to that, because I deal in authenticity. That's part of my job. But actually, there are greater. I've just almost written a PhD on this one. Um, there are greater truths to be told with a little bit of fiction than there are with just sticking with the facts, I
mm.
feel. So I was all for that paragraph. And when I read that, I went, hooray!
Yeah, yeah,
And let's face it, not everybody is going to be a Tudor historian.
I'm not.
So that's it. Thomas, so tradecraft, I like it as I read in the rules, but I haven't yet grokked in my head how it's played. Do you think you could give how do you think it happens?
So the descriptions, like I've only read this in the last 24 hours myself. So, but I think it's meant to be that sort of capacity to flex, right? So what the players do is they've got a tradecraft available to them, and it changes per scenario, which I really like as well. So you're not locked in, but you don't lose it. It just becomes part of your narrative structure, right? Which I'm almost quoting the book verbatim here.
Yes.
So what you do is you encounter the villain, or you encounter the effect, or you call upon it at a particularly complex or important moment, and you say, but I know, Fred Jones, who's a member of the Sewersmen's Guild. So we will use that to, navigate the sewers on our way to the villains.
And we should say that the tradecrafts, they give you a sort of classification, and there's things like access, which is about knowing all the people that you're connected to. Conspiracy, which is about odd things in institutions. A bit of kit, which is like your James Bond watch, although I imagine it would be your pocket sundial in this particular case. Actual magic, vigilance, and system, which is about knowing who to, well, not so much who to talk to, but how things work in the governance of the thing. So I like all those, but what gets me a little bit is it says getting you choose one as a key resource at the end of the adventure, at the beginning of the adventure, before you start even. And then it says, and then you might meet a creature that needs 3 of these things, And I'm thinking, well, your first adventure, you've only got one so far. So how do you go about acquiring the other two things?
Well, but hold on, it's not one per group; it's one per agent. So,
Oh, is it? Oh, I hadn't twigged that. I thought it was one for the
I'm
whole
pretty
group.
sure it's no. I'll just triple million check. Must choose.
Well, there's another thing that
Oh no,
confuses
maybe you're
me.
right. No, maybe you're right.
Maybe we need to go to Paul and ask him this one. So narratively, the table decides who made the final choice, and that agent marks it on their character sheet. So I'm a little bit vague about how that's going to work. So,
But in broader answer to the question, which I think is probably the point, is that's actually what I like about it, right? Like, you're not promised a sort of magical defeat of a major villain through sort of pulling it out of your bag in the first encounter. And that's explicitly the example Paul gives, which I think is really powerful, right? Set up a major villain and hide within that major villain the secrets that are necessary to defeat them, which is a little Vesson-esque, yeah? So, you don't just defeat the villain by shooting them with a gun. You don't just defeat the villain by knowing that they're working for the Catholics, right? Because they're powerfully politically connected, and it's not enough to know they're working with Catholics because they've got protection. So you've got to unpick that protection before you can bring the truth of their, horrible religious choices to Walsingham so things can be dealt with, right? To use a non-magical example. So I actually think it's really good because it doesn't just automagically, in exactly the same way that you can't throw fireballs around, you can't throw tradecraft around. It helps, and you've got to think about it. And you've got to unpick and do research and find out the villain, which is classic spycraft, right? Like, you're meant to be investigating, not just sort of magicking away the problem.
No, well, that's.
Sorry, I have
Go
something
ahead,
to add
Andy.
there.
Then add it.
Tradecraft to me. The tradecraft to me, I saw this. I thought, okay, imagine this is like a series of 3 adventures becomes a series of 3 novels. Yeah, a one per group.
Paul
there
is
you go.
watching, and one per.
Hey, hello. But the way I saw this was actually the theme to each novel within a trilogy or whatever. So you might have one that focused on a magical item, or one that focused on a sort of government level conspiracy or whatever. And it becomes a sort of genre thing for each one in a way, right? There you go. I think Paul said it way better than I ever could. Yeah, basically that's the way I saw it. I was seeing it as a sort of narrative background almost to each individual scenario that you might focus on one thing or another, but set by the players, not by the GM, which is I thought quite nice.
Okay, we're short of time. We want to keep this to a 40-minute segment, and we're almost halfway through it. So, Thomas, what's your next thing you really like?
I'm going to for efficiency, I'm going to combine something. I like the way the character backgrounds are generated, particularly in the context of the quote you just made. My third point was going to be about the fact that I think he's made which is similar to your point, I think he's made a really good stab at how do I make it interesting historically without overwhelming you with information. And I think the occupation background thing does a really good job of that, right? Like, it gives you just a sense of who you could be or who you were, and it gives you a context without burning, hours and hours of time reading. I like it a lot. And I like the use of the cards, which is unusual because I hate cards.
Oh, yeah.
No, I think it's really good. Sorry about the dog in the background going off. But that's my second one.
Okay. Andy, what's your second one?
Humors and unraveling. That places it firmly in Tudor period England, I think. The concept of the 4 humors, the concept of how they drive your character's psyche, if you like. These are consequences to unraveling. So when you see something you don't understand, or kind of like Sanity in Cthulhu, but not the same. It's you unravel.
What I really like about it is it's
whatever.
not like Sanity in Cthulhu,
yes, exactly,
which I feel is a little bit cringeworthy.
But you have a gripe with Cthulhu Sanity at the minute, anyway, don't you?
So and let's not talk about the game in which I am playing.
Yeah, but no, the humors and the unraveling, I think, is entirely in character with the setting. The use of an unbalanced humour, if you like. I should explain the four basic liquids that govern the body in Tudor medical science: the bile, the phlegm, the melancholia, the blood, whatever. These things drive your personality, so they believed. And the way the game handles encounters with something you can't comprehend, or is too horrific or whatever, is to imbalance those humours, and then out of that you get a consequence, which is a change in your behaviour. You may become more aggressive, or you may become, sort of witless or whatever. And I really like that. That strikes me as a better way of handling an encounter with something you can't comprehend. B, it doesn't mean you're instantly, wheeled off to Bedlam or somewhere. You are, you know, able to sort of rationalize it later and come to some outcome from it, rather with the Cthulhu thing where you end up with scared of chickens for some reason. And the third thing is that it feels very free leaguey, if you see what I mean, with the conditions of broken and everything else. It's the same sort of thing, and I like that a lot. And I think that really works. I haven't played it obviously, but I think that will really work well in the game. It doesn't mean that everyone instantly becomes some sort of catatonic, drooling maniac just because they've seen something green and slimy, So yeah, that's good.
I really like that too. And unlike the tradecraft, which I struggled to grok, the humours and the unraveling all felt good to me. Now, since Paul is in the comments, I'm going to ask a question of Paul and see whether he responds. I wondered whether the unraveling element was similar to how it's dealt with in the Cthulhu hack. We'll leave that question hanging while we go back to you, Andy, for what's your third thing that you really like?
Ironically, my third thing was tradecraft, which we've already covered. So I will skip that.
Okay. Oh, I didn't do my second thing. My second thing is I love, as you say, Thomas, the use of cards. Now, did you say, Thomas, you're not a fan of cards generally in role-playing games? Same with my co-host, Dave. Hates the buggers. Why is it, Thomas, that you're not a fan of cards?
You're
muted, Thomas.
There it is. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, the dog was barking in the background. I didn't think it was going to be helpful. I hate cards for two reasons. One, I mostly do virtual tabletop role playing because I'm time poor and I don't have the time to travel to people's houses. So cards are woeful on that sort of setting. They never work. And two, I just don't like them. I'm not going to lie. I just don't like cards. I've never liked cards.
So Dave doesn't like cards in role. I keep trying to introduce cards in role-playing games, and he doesn't like it. And it's something to do with it not feeling as random as dice.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the attraction. That that if you're, and I'm no card counter, I have to say, but the idea, you've seen all these hearts pop up, so you're going to be getting a bunch of bloody clubs and diamonds or whatever. I like the feeling of that. But what I really love about the way that Paul has handled cards here is it's entirely optional. So there's enough of them and enough use of them, especially in the text. We'll come on to the text in a moment. So that makes it feel a little bit Elizabethan. I don't know why cards should feel particularly Elizabethan, but I'm going to go with that. But also, every time the cards are mentioned, it kind of also says, and if you want to do it with dice, you do it this way in a neat, simple way. So, yeah, best of both worlds, I think. So that was the second thing I liked. And we're rushing ahead now. I'm not going to do the third thing I like because I can't quite remember what it is now. I'm pretty sure we've covered it. What are the things that you might change, or given that Paul's here listening in, that you might suggest to him that he might change?
No pressure.
Yeah, suddenly scary. I'd go with associations. I think the associations are odd. They sort of stand out in a way. I'm not sure that I would want every player character to have an association for starters. If you are playing someone if you're just playing a character that's been dragged into Dee's or Walsingham's world through whatever means, you're not necessarily going to have an association. You may just have some background that says, you're a suspected heretic or Catholic or whatever. There we go. That's a very useful
Yeah,
answer.
that's what we thought. Thank you.
Be kind. Okay, I'll try. I will honestly try. No, associations. I think the associations they're not wrong, as it were. They just stand out as a bit maybe difficult to integrate in a way. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I'd like to roll a few characters up and see how it fits in my internal narrative. I can see your point because I'm not a fan of games where there are factions and you belong to a faction. You know, it's sort of like a class. But I don't honestly think this is that. And I do feel it's only in association with these. It doesn't mean that you're on the board of directors of any of these
It
organizations.
doesn't mean you're a member. No.
No.
It means you have a sort of interest in that area, as far as I can see. And you do get some sort of skills from that interest in that area. Yeah. But some of them, I mean, Chevalier de Troyes Imposture or whatever is a French movement, as far as I can see, and that would be a Catholic movement, so that would be a bit difficult to integrate in an English setting, perhaps. I don't know. There are.
Oh no, it wouldn't. Everybody's bloody Catholic. I mean,
secretly, yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to rant on here.
Sunday.
The idea of a monarch being a Protestant just doesn't make any sense at all. Sorry. Monarchs are appointed by God, therefore the natural order of life is that, and you know, and our particular Protestants, our monarchs appoint the bishop, and they're not really
part
Protestant.
of my problem with that. I don't know. I just don't know how I would work them into a game in a reasonable way without saying that you just follow the pamphlets, as it were, and read about them. It's
which I think might be all that you need to do. Is you've got a little bit of stuff there that you can build on then with your tradecraft. I imagine that's an angle you can take.
I guess so. I don't know. I certainly don't want every character being a member of some faction or other, because it will become if you let it get out of hand, it will become incredibly difficult to run. So that some sort of interest or association, a loose association, is fine. But if this is meant to be, you're a member, then at some level, then that I think would cause me some problems. Especially trying to integrate something like the Druids of the Eternal Grove in a Tudor background, that I might find some problems with. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But yeah, in general, I don't have a massive problem with it. It just doesn't feel quite right to me, just reading it as is. So sorry, Paul. I tried to be kind. I hope that was kind enough.
Not sure there, but don't worry. I think I'm going to be really unkind. Thomas, be kind.
Be kind. Yeah. First of all, I like factions. There you go. But then, of course, I love and I find it funny, Matt, that you said you don't like a game that's heavy on factions, and yet Coriolis is your favourite Year Zero game. Just leaving that there,
and that's
just putting that. No.
Go ahead. I will unpack that one. You don't have to be a member of a faction. The beauty of the factions in Coriolis is they are the wheels that crush the normal mortals under their machinations. Only a few people are actually members of any of those factions. That's what I love about Coriolis. Okay, carry on. We're not talking about Coriolis.
And my Coriolis game, I've got everyone lined up on a faction. So anyway, we'll see how that plays. Okay, so the thing I struggled with in the rules, and it was actually that I actually found the die movement thing quite confusing. I'll be upfront. I read it and I really struggled. Like, there was columns and rows being called out for how you add and move die around, and I was going, hold on, where are these columns and rows? Where are they referenced earlier in the book? So actually, I found the description of the die mechanic difficult to consume on a first reading. That's probably this. And funny story, I mean, that's pretty much the same place I was at with Twilight 2000, harking back to previous commentary. The step up, step down thing always feels a bit complex to me, and so I always have to sort of tackle it twice to get it in my head, and I usually need to roll it out a few times to really get it. But I did find it difficult to track through the game rules because it's kind of called out in a couple of different places, and I struggled with that a bit. So for me, I'd be looking for something up front that really just kind of nailed the dice mechanic really clearly. Right, that just said, This is how the dice...
Yeah.
Before you even look at a character, let me explain to you how I intend dice mechanic to work in this game. Because I'm going to introduce the dice mechanic when I talk you through the character description, and you're going to need to know something basic about it before you hit that boundary condition. Anyway, that was just my experience. Completely personal. Other people may not have had that problem.
And for all of us, this is like our first, maybe, Andy, you've managed a second reading. You said you were going to read it again today.
I had a quick read today. I've read it once before, yeah.
Now, for me, it didn't... Generally, I think I grokked it. There was one example given where I thought, oh, no, that's almost the opposite of what I thought. So there was that one where I just wonder whether there's a word missing or something from there that I will try and dig out and tell Paul about if it is, or reread it. But there was a little bit of confusion, but generally I wasn't as confused as you say. But this brings me to my thing I might change. I did find it as a whole... For a set of rules that are 44 pages long and relatively small pages, difficult to read. And thinking about that just before the show, because I was thinking, well, why is it difficult to read? And I think it's a type of, and I'm a typographer, or my training includes typography. There's some stuff here where I think the actual type size is a bit big for a 2-column form.
Oh,
oops.
Well, obviously, he wasn't very correct in what he was saying. And the internet has kicked him off.
And
so
Paul,
while he's re-establishing his connection or whatever, I would say that I don't think there's a problem with the typography. And I know that Matt can be a little bit of a typography freak. So I'm not going to go there. I will go back to look at Paul's comment underneath there, which Matt has left up. The associations that I can see, I can understand that. I can understand you need some way of getting other abilities into your characters. I don't know quite how you do it in another way, but I think that I would probably avoid them to some extent because I don't really like factions. So anyway, I don't know if that's coming back.
And then there was this 8-minute conversation between Andy and Tom, and then it ended. Just quietly went away.
Oh, hang on. He's saying that he's cut off. But are we still on? Yes, we're still on. Oh no, hang on. He might be coming in.
There's a black box.
There's a black box.
Hey,
he's back. Hello. Can you hear us, Matt?
Oh, he's very
slow.
Very slow.
Okay. We may have to call this if there's connection problems.
I'm really struggling. I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
I think we might have to call this to an end. We seem to be having internet problems at this end. The stars constantly seek to frustrate us.
It's because you mentioned you were a secret Catholic. The Walsingers agents are cutting you off.
So we might have to call it quits, I'm afraid.
That's okay.
I will just give you two a chance to unfreeze, or maybe for me to unfreeze.
We're not frozen, so it's human, I think. Okay.
Yeah, he's gone back to being frozen again.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think the internet seems to be a problem at my end. Weirdly, it seems to be on the download as opposed to the upload, but we can't have a proper conversation here. So, and I know you've got to go quite soon, Thomas. So we'll invite Paul onto the show and do a proper podcast of it at some point. And yes, Paul, I can see your comment. Yes, I'm a tight-faced pedant. And I'll share my comments with you less publicly.
Actually, that was me, Matt. When you disappeared, I called you a tight-faced pedant.
But anyway, thank you very much, Andy, for joining us, and thank you, Thomas. It's been a pleasure having you as two frozen images on my screen. We will come back. Oh yeah, we're really struggling. I'm going to say goodbye now, and I expect you guys to say goodbye at some point, even though you're frozen in time to me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
See ya.
Bye.